Hi, welcome back to Digital Defense. I am your host, Jordan Robertson. This is your weekly cybersecurity show, broadcasting to you live from our Washington, D.C. Bloomberg News Bureau. As repeat viewers of this show will know, this is the place where we try to make sense of the week of cybersecurity news and add some sanity and some security to your digital life. The big news this week that I want to talk about, which we're seeing some really big breaches these days, which we'll talk about on the show as well. It seemed like things couldn't get worse for Yahoo, which earlier this year admitted that it had lost 1 billion user accounts in a major hack. And then it did. Then it got worse this week. Yahoo announced that it had lost not just 1 billion user account details, but all 3 billion user account details for that company. Now, you would be forgiven for asking the natural question, are there even 3 billion people that use Yahoo? The answer to that question is no. Of course, there are not 3 billion people who have used Yahoo. People have multiple accounts. There are dead accounts. People have different accounts throughout the system. Nevertheless, Yahoo's data breach this week, again, just got exponentially worse. But the company's already sold to Verizon. So this is what we're going to talk about on the show today is what do you do if you are one of these either 3 billion people or any of these 3 billion accounts are yours. I've got some pretty specific advice for you, regarding what you should do if if you are a Yahoo customer and a Yahoo user. And as always, Digital Defense is an interactive show. We urge you to write in with any of your comments or questions in the comments section below. We're broadcasting live on the terminal, on Bloomberg.com, as well as Facebook and Periscope. So wherever you're viewing this, if you have questions for me, either on the Yahoo breach or any other cybersecurity topic, please feel free to write those in, and I'm going to get those questions right here. We'll answer as many of them as we can. So first off, here's what I want to talk about. So top line number, Yahoo says this week that 3 billion user accounts were exposed in previously disclosed breaches. That is literally all of the accounts that company possesses. But there's a really interesting thing about the way that attack occurred. This was not just a smash and grab attack against Yahoo. This was an attack, and I want to show you a slide here to highlight this. There's a very particular thing about the way this attack worked, and I think viewers of the show come to the show for this kind of information. So I want to walk you through what was special about Yahoo's attack, not just because of the large number of accounts affected. It is because the Yahoo attackers were doing a very particular thing. They were so deep into Yahoo's network and so deep into the control systems for that company's account management system that they were able to forge the cookies that companies like Yahoo leave on your web browser to authenticate you when you return to that website. So what they were able to do, in layman's terms, is they were able to compromise Yahoo's system so deeply that they were able to log directly into people's accounts, even people who have, and I recommend this all the time, get two-factor authentication on your phone, get a text message alert every time you log in. They were able to bypass all of that because they were able to forge cookies and access people's accounts. The reason I'm leading with this is I want to really emphasize this. I mean, some viewers may remember this from from our earlier discussions about the Yahoo breach. But this point right here is really, really critical to remember. In a lot of these breaches, what we will see, take Equifax, for example. The attackers who broke into Equifax, and we wrote a big story about this last week, happy to talk about it if folks have questions. The big thing about Equifax was the attackers stole information. They stole a lot of information about American adult consumers. Now, on its own, that information is valuable, but it doesn't necessarily mean they can directly log into your account. It doesn't necessarily mean immediately they can log into your bank account. It makes it a lot easier, but it doesn't grant them immediate access to your, to your other additional internet accounts. What the Yahoo hackers were doing was they were literally able to bypass any security mechanism that I talk about in this show, that Yahoo implements in its own systems, and able to access, potentially millions of people's accounts instantaneously. That's a really, really big deal, especially if, like many of us, we're either Yahoo users or people who are Yahoo users. How do you counsel somebody about protecting their digital security when what the attackers were doing was this. Again, this is not new news, but now that we know 3 billion accounts were affected, this news takes on new resonance. Because what this means is if any of your accounts were among those 3 billion, the attackers had a way to access them by bypassing any security mechanism you can imagine. So, that leads to the question of, what are you supposed to do if you are one of these 3 billion? And we're getting some questions in here, so I'm going to answer some of these, and please feel free to write some of these, and I've got some advice coming up here. The first question here is, I don't even remember if I have a Yahoo account. How can I check? I definitely don't remember my password or ID. The reason I'm laughing is because, again, 3 billion accounts, it's a real number, but it's very misleading. Most of those are inactive accounts, dead accounts, multiple accounts, people just claiming names that that are related to theirs. Yahoo does not have 3 billion users. If you want to check if you have an account, it's actually really easy. I mean, you can just go to the Yahoo site, and type in your username and the email account that you believe you had, and then click the "Forgot your password" function, and try to log in again that way. That process is rife with security vulnerabilities. However, there's usefulness there for consumers. But this is a real problem. I mean, Yahoo has ceded a lot of ground to Google. I mean, today people have Gmail accounts. Yahoo is seen in some cases being a little bit outdated. So there are many of these accounts that are outdated accounts. They are dead accounts, like this viewer is asking. If you don't even remember if you have an account, actually, here's my advice to this viewer. If you don't even remember that you have an account, literally do nothing. Don't do anything. Yahoo is forcing password changes for people who they knew were affected, and they're urging people who have an active account to log in and change their password. But here's the really important thing I want viewers to take away from this episode. Don't go canceling your Yahoo accounts. You're going to hear me say this a lot over the course of this show. Don't go trying to kill out your accounts, and there's a really important reason why. As everybody knows, you have to link these email accounts to all kinds of other internet accounts these days. Bank accounts, other email accounts, Twitter, Facebook, things like that. So the chances that your old, ancient Yahoo account is linked to some other current account that you are using, such as your bank account, such as your Twitter, your Facebook, or some such, it's pretty high. I mean, people link these things. You're required to do it in many cases. So what happens, though, and this is pretty interesting, if you kill out your Yahoo account, Yahoo within 30 days will recycle that name. So if I am, jordan.robertson@yahoo.com, which I'm not, but if I were, and I surrender that identity, and that becomes available again, and hackers have all this information. If you are an individual who is, on the target list of these hackers, they will find a way to recapture your email address and then log into other accounts under your name. So the big takeaway lesson and message of this show is, if you've got a Yahoo account, even if you're not using it, don't kill it out. It could potentially expose you to more damage. And if you're not using it, just let it go. Don't do anything. Leave well enough alone. It's funny. These questions are funny to me because they're similar. Next question here is, what if I haven't used my account in years, all caps? Could I still have been impacted? Yes, indeed, you were impacted. As long as you never killed out your account, you are among the 3 billion users. But as I told responded to the previous question, there's a big difference between having your data stolen and being vulnerable to any meaningful kind of hack resulting from it. If you literally have not used this account in years and you haven't linked it to any accounts that you're currently using, such as bank accounts and so forth, the risk of you being impacted by this breach is just very, very low. I mean, it's non-zero, but it's still very, very low. So again, my advice, if you haven't used the account in years, and if you forgot the password, you can't access it, just let it go. Forget about it. The chances that you're going to experience any meaningful harm from this part of the hack is very, very minor. We've got some good questions here. Let me get to a couple more slides that I wanted to add on to that answer I just gave by highlighting a story that we wrote actually when this breach first happened. This story was it's a story that kind of flew under the radar, but I really want to highlight it for viewers today. This was a story we wrote at the end of 2016 when Yahoo disclosed that it was the victim of a hack that compromised 1 billion user accounts. That was twice the number they said had leaked previously. We wrote a story about how the data set includes fields, stolen data, that the company doesn't talk a lot about, but are really, really important to certain types of hackers. In this case, there were more than 150,000 U.S. government and military employees who were victims of the Yahoo breach, whose information was included in the original hack, but it wasn't just their username, hashed password, which is an encrypted password. These passwords weren't encrypted in many cases. There was also additional information. The reason we were able to identify that these individuals were U.S. government workers were Yahoo also leaked your backup email address. The really critical thing about this is we all put in our backup email addresses in case we're locked out, and you can get your passcode and you can log back in, just like the previous viewers who may not have used their accounts in years. In these cases, these were individuals who had used their official U.S. government email address as the backup email address. The reason this is significant is if you are among those folks in the audience and you are a Yahoo user and you use your official U.S. government email address or any other email address that would indicate that you work in a sensitive position, either inside a corporation or inside a government, whether it's U.S. government or others, you should pay special attention to this breach because that information that leaked gives attackers, it paints a bullseye on you, for more targeted attacks. If you work for a government, if you work for a large corporation like a Bloomberg or like a bank or whatever, that information also leaked as well. Yahoo does not talk about it. They kind of very quietly acknowledged this in our previous story, but you need to know your backup email addresses also likely leaked. And the information that was leaked in this breach could allow hackers to compromise those accounts. Very, very important to remember in case you did put a backup email address that might indicate you work in a sensitive position. You're particularly at risk. And I'm not a fearmonger on the show. Anybody who watches the show will know that. However, there are a particular set of risks if those conditions apply to your situation. Next question here. Again, please feel free to comment and send any questions in. We're getting some good ones, and please keep them coming. Question here is, should I just delete my account? And my answer, as I mentioned earlier, is no. In fact, you put yourself at more risk if you just delete your account because these usernames get recycled, and hackers could take over that account and try to compromise other accounts belonging to you, or try to spam friends and attack friends and family, things like that. Don't delete your account. There's really nothing to be gained from it. Now, if you are a current Yahoo user and you're fed up with the security issue, that's a different matter. You can, of course, make the decision to go to something like Gmail or Outlook or some other provider. However, I would still caution you, because all this information leaked, still don't delete your account. Lock it down, secure it as much as you can. But if you delete it, again, these are linked to many other aspects of your digital life, and that could pose a real problem for you. So don't delete your account. I'm going to sound like a broken record, but it's the most important lesson of the day. Is my credit score at risk, writes another viewer. Not in any direct way that I can see. I mean, if you're asking about the Equifax breach, which I believe this viewer is, I can certainly talk about that as well. As viewers of the show will know, we've covered the Equifax breach extensively. There were more than 145 million consumer profiles that were leaked in that breach. We published a big story last week indicating that at least internally to Equifax, the security researchers there believed it was a Chinese state-sponsored attack. What we've reported is that federal investigators believe it was a nation-state attack, but it was not China. We haven't gotten any further information on that. We will certainly report it to you when we do. But that's a really important distinction. I'm not raising that for no reason. I'm raising that because the Equifax breach, as far as anybody can tell, was the product of a nation-state attack. And that means the people utilizing that information are intelligence agencies or the intelligence agencies of a foreign nation. Now, that should not help you sleep at night. It's not a good thing. However, in terms of actual fraud and fraud that you would see, the chances are so low that you would see any direct fraud from that breach, because the people looking at that information are spies, are trying to find data points that they can cross-reference and target individuals of interest to them. That's why I just mentioned the bit about U.S. government employees having their information leaked in the Yahoo breach. What intelligence agencies do is they will take that information and they'll pull data from here, they'll pull data from there, and they will assemble a profile of targets of intelligence investigations to hack those individuals. So your credit score is not at risk, as far as I'm aware. It's a very valid question. Your credit score could be at risk if somebody takes out a lot of credit cards in your name, they take out home loans in your name, and they default on them or whatever. But if you sign up for free credit monitoring, which all these companies offer, that's a pretty good way to ensure that you're not impacted. Some people choose to go the route of a credit freeze. It's a little more extreme. You got to keep on top of a PIN code that these companies send you. If you lose that, you're kind of in big trouble. It's hard to reverse these. But I say sign up for the free credit monitoring. Your credit score will likely not be impacted in any way. Another question here, when did this breach happen? Sure, let me give you some history of the Yahoo breach. This has been a long-running saga for this company. So in 2016, so last year, about a year ago, Yahoo had to disclose, because information was floating around the dark web, that it was the victim of a breach that compromised 500 million people's accounts. For any company Yahoo size, this is one of the worst things you can encounter. You've lost customers' data. You've lost access to their email accounts. And I say this to everybody. We don't truly know, the public doesn't truly know the scale of these breaches until somebody compromises, let's say, the Google search engine history. You talk about things that people don't want out about them. Your credit information, you can cancel a credit card. When malicious hackers start to get really, really nasty and they leak information like that, if they access and leak information like that, you're going to see real damage that you can't protect with a credit score, a credit reporting service and things like that, credit protection service. What happened here was Yahoo lost 500 million accounts. A few months go by, some researchers find that the breach was far worse, and then Yahoo in December of 2016, as I just showed, they disclosed that the breach was actually twice as many. It was 1 billion user accounts. And now Yahoo is revising that further upward and saying all 3 billion accounts that the company had under its control were compromised. This breach, to answer this question, stretches all the way back to 2013. The hackers were inside Yahoo for at least 3 years, and we have some visibility into what they were doing. One of the questions that comes up for me as I'm investigating these stories, and me and colleagues here are trying to figure out what happens in these breaches, is how do you walk out the door with 3 billion accounts? Like that's terabytes of data. You can't just walk out the door with that. So how does it work? Our best understanding is that at some point in 2013, a group of criminal hackers, they were inside Yahoo looking for email addresses, valid email addresses for spamming purposes. One of the things about the dark web is you can buy email addresses on the dark web if you're a spammer. Many of those are outdated. Many of those are garbage. What you want are current, valid email addresses so you can spam people with notices for prescription drugs or whatever it is. The problem with with the breach was then they were followed on by additional hackers, and the additional hackers stole even more data, about individuals. And what happens in a breach like this is these attackers, as far as we know, were able to gain control of the management console for Yahoo. Now, this is the program, kind of the God program, if you will, for managing accounts within Yahoo. And what these attackers were able to do is able to just query the database over and over and over and over with automated programs or bots, extract the data, encrypt it, take it out of the network, kind of as they're going. If you're inside a network with that level of control for 3 years, you can take everything that's not nailed down, and even some stuff that is. So that's the timeline of this breach. It was absolutely devastating. It impacted the sale price of Yahoo when it sold itself to Verizon. And, they lost hundreds of millions of dollars off the price of that deal. So this was a disastrous occurrence for Yahoo, a company that was already struggling, even before that. It's a pretty interesting timeline. Next question here is, I got hacked, but I reset my password. What else should I do? Well, regular viewers of the show will know I always encourage you to, on your phone, enable two-factor authentication. As this attack proves, that is not a fail-safe. Against any form of breach. In this case, the Yahoo hackers were able to forge the cookies that allowed them to access these accounts immediately, bypassing any of these security restrictions. But in this case, it is still very good practice to create a good password, but that's not the most important thing these days, because as this shows, if your password leaks, even if it's 1,000,000 characters long and the hardest password in the world to remember, all a criminal has to do is copy and paste and get into your account. So create a good password, but don't stress yourself out about it. More importantly, enable two-factor authentication. So that means every time you log into your account, you will get an alert. They will say, and either enter this code or authorize yourself to log in. There are ways around this. The additional piece of advice I give people, if you're watching the show, you're probably concerned about security, as you should be. So the additional piece of advice I give is create a strong password, enable two-factor authentication on your phone, and in addition, contact your wireless provider. Contact your wireless provider. So that you can set up a password. So you can set up a password in the in their systems, so that when somebody calls them and tries to socially engineer them into changing your phone number. This has happened. It happened to Black Lives Matter activists. You need to have a password on your wireless carrier's account as well. And that's a really, really important thing. It's a really, really important thing to remember, is that there are two things you need to do. Secure the account to your device, and then also secure your wireless carrier's account. And the way this works, very brief explanation, is if somebody knows, a hacker knows that you have two-factor authentication enabled on your phone.
Okay, Mike 7, Mike 7, Mike 7.
What they can do is they can contact your wireless provider, and they can trick them into changing your phone number to send these alerts to a different number, a number under their control. They can bypass the security mechanisms, and they can log into your accounts. Let's see here. Next question here. Last question here. We appreciate all the questions. Thank you so much for sending those in. How can I easily find out if I was hacked? This is the easiest question of the show. If you had a Yahoo account or you have a Yahoo account, you're among the victims.
Okay,
there is nothing more complicated than that. This is it's just very simple to know. If you are a Yahoo account holder, you are a victim. Doesn't mean you need to freak out, but it does mean you need to take some precautions, especially if, and you hear me say this a lot, especially if you occupy a sensitive position that might put you at risk of being a hacking target. So with that, we need to wrap here. We're out of time. Thank you so much for everybody who watched. We broadcast every week live at noon Eastern from the Washington, D.C. Bureau of Bloomberg News. You can write to me offline. I'm on Twitter at JordanR1000, Jordan, the letter R1000. Please do check out our website as well, where we have links to archived versions of this show and a colleague Mark Gurman's great show called Gadgets with Gurman, where he reviews the latest and greatest technology gadgets. You'll find those on our homepage at bloomberg.com/technology. Thanks again for everybody who watched. We'll see you next week, and thanks again.